throughout this time, whoever you are being is going to be amplified. That's the nature of this energy that's coming in. If you are happy, joyful, connected, that's going to be magnified. If you are completely invested in this charade of politics and the fear and the separation, division, it's just going to get worse and worse for you. Ever since I was a young kid, 17 or whatever, I imagined my life as a movie. I had to live a big life. So what do you do to live a big life? You have to make main character choices. So that is something I would leave people with, is like, don't belittle, make main character choices.
Welcome to Harmonic Alignment,
a podcast that explores the new frontier of energy medicine,
bridging the gap between Western medicine and quantum physics,
giving you easy and practical solutions.
Guided by
me, Dr. Larissa Sharipova,
and me, Priscilla Koblentz. Join us on a journey discovering your harmonic alignment. On today's episode of Harmonic Alignment, we have an amazing guest who is living his life in harmonic alignment. Tim Shields is a highly sought-after author, editor, and literary collaborator who is bridging the gaps between science, consciousness, and human potential using the power of storytelling. Tim is hanging out with some of my favorite people and mentors, Dr. Zach Bush, Dr. Joe Dispenza, and Harry Massey. His first best-selling book, A Curious Year and the Great Vivarium Experiment, and his soon-to-be-released book, Dream Tethering, 13 Keys to Creating the Life of Your Dreams. This is an inspiring conversation with Tim. He's asking us to step up and become the lead character of our movie and our story. Enjoy.
Tim, I am so excited you are joining me on Harmonic Alignment's podcast today to talk about all of my favorite things: consciousness, personal development. Why are we here? What is your perception of consciousness?
I mean, could I get a softball to start here? Consciousness is the organizing principle of the universe. We exist in this third dimension because consciousness, or energy, because energy is consciousness, has slowed down beneath the speed of light. Above the speed of light, we just have energy and the wave. And then once you break the speed of light, the wave turns into matter. So the particle and the wave are the same thing. And as you slow that all the way down, you get the third dimension, which is matter. So I think that we are a fractal of the one, of consciousness, having a human experience, or as Teilhard de Chardin, who was a Jesuit poet, priest, philosopher, and paleontologist, who got excommunicated from the Catholic Church, which means he was probably doing something right. He said, we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. So consciousness is the all and the one. It's the mechanism by which creation happens.
Love that. You just hit my favorite line. We're divine beings having a human experience. I think that's actually my tagline in the Zach Bush community. That's incredible. What's your origin story? How did you first realize there was something more out there?
I was 17 and I was a pretty sensitive kid. I was one of the best soccer players in the state, and I could be super, social and all that stuff, but I was really kind of an introvert. And at 17, I went to a Grateful Dead concert and took a accidental heroic dose of mushrooms. And now I can say I experienced consciousness and I experienced this love. In the beginning, it was like a rocket ship going up. It was like this force sort of shattered maybe who I was or the trajectory I was on. And then it was like, once I got into the orbit, I experienced this like love and this unity. And thank God we didn't have cell phones, because I wanted to call my parents and be like, I'm on a really powerful hallucinogen right now, but I have a good head on my shoulders and blah, blah, blah. And I wanted to call my sisters and tell them, I understand what you're talking about now. I guess my sister's boyfriend at the time was kind of my idol. He was about 10 years older than me. And he was the first guy that made being smart look really cool. He was like good looking, he was smart, and he wanted to be a writer. So I kind of started keeping a journal because of him. And so September 29th, 1991, I wrote on this red mead notebook, warning, do not open, like That's the biggest invitation you can possibly have. And I just started keeping a journal. I wanted to be a writer so bad, I started asking to be used as an instrument of peace. And, life happened. Next thing you know, college and then out of college. And I thought I was just going to come out of college and people were just going to like pay me to travel around the world and write about it. Like, hello, a philosophy major nonetheless. I moved around a bit. I went to travel in Greece and moved to Portland, Oregon, came back to New York City. I was kind of like chasing .com busts, right at the end of the .com bust, chasing IPOs. I got passed up for 2 jobs in the World Trade Center in May 2001. I moved to Seattle, July 2001.
You could have been in the World Trade Tower in 2000.
Yeah. If I'm a cat, I probably have about 4 lives left. There was another situation at the end of my first book, A Curious Year in the Great Vivarium Experiment. You're going to have to read that one to learn about that one. But I just kind of felt trapped and a little bit lost in like this stunted creative. And I would just move from job to job, like freelancing. I'm like, okay, this job's going to fill this itch. This is going to fill this creative itch. I was not in the process of self-actualizing my dream, which is kind of what my new work is about. But at some point, I remembered I was like 35 or something. And I was like, man, I used to ask to be used as an instrument of peace. I should start doing that again. And then next thing you know, I'm working with Dr. Joe Dispenza for the next 6 years. I went to my first workshop in January 2010, and I was just sitting there completely gobsmacked because I was like, oh my God, this guy has wrapped language around everything I've been thinking and feeling for all these years. Like 19 years old, thinking about time, space, dimension. And at that age, I thought it was like, you take psychedelics, you escape, blah, 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 blah. But at the end of one of the sessions, Joe was like, I want to talk to you. And it turns out that before I was born, my family lived one town over from his family in New Jersey. So he's like, you want the fucking Alfonso's Pizza? I went to Alfonso's Pizza. Blah, 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 blah. And then he invited us to be his guests for dinner that night. And I was trying to put my first kind of work out into the world. And he was trying to find this literary agent for me and couldn't find her. It was kind of like a little bit pre-Facebook and all that stuff. But we just stayed in touch. And my sister reminded me years later, and it's funny because I'm just starting to play with a little bit conscious language more. But when I left that weekend, I said to my sisters, I'm going to write for that guy someday. And it took 5 years for that to happen. The way that unfolded was, I'd go like once a year or something and I'd see him and I'd be like, we'd be great collaborators. And probably April 2015, I went to like this 4-day workshop in Carefree, Arizona. I was beating myself up the whole time. I'm just like, I'm not doing this right. Everybody's having these profound experiences. I'm talking to my sister. I'm like almost in tears. I'm like, I'm a failure at this. Like, I don't get it. The whole time I was at this workshop, I was focusing on creating a full-time job and a mentor. And the full-time job was because I was always freelancing and I was engaged in this process. I'm like, I got to finish this book. I just got to see this through. I don't know what's going to happen. So I land in Seattle. I'm still on the tarmac and I get this LinkedIn message and this guy's like, hey, I just left Microsoft after 10 years. I'm at this unicorn company and we need a writer. You should really check this out. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I take the light rail into Seattle and I run into the guy on a street corner. And he's like, dude, you really got to apply to this job. And I was like, I got the message. So I got the job, and every day before work for 6 months, I went to a coffee shop from anywhere from like 30 minutes on a bad day to an hour and a half on a good day. And it took me exactly 6 months to finish this draft. And when I finished it, I was like, holy shit, I think I have a book here. It was like divinely appointed. Like the minute I finished it, I got laid off. And I was like, yes. I'm like, I'm just going to work on this all winter. And I literally left the building. My energy was lit up. And I said out loud, what amazing things about to happen to me. And probably within 3 minutes, I got a text from Joe Dispenza's assistant and said, hey, would you be interested in helping Joe edit his blogs and work on his blogs? So it took me 6 months, but I manifested the job and the mentor. And what I realized was, and I just said this to a bunch of people because I was just at a Dispenza workshop and they were like, thank you so much for saying that. I don't have to have those profound internal experiences for it to work. Like, I just have to show up. I have to do the work. I have to be still. I have to get into my heart and connect with that future potential of what I want to unfold in my life. And that's kind of how you become the conscious creator of your life. So,
Tim, I love that. I mean, were you early on in childhood, were you aware of your ability to consciously create? Or was it just after that experience with the mushrooms?
my parents were very Catholic. I was an altar boy. I went to Catholic school, church every Sunday. My mom had this Catholic magazine called Leaves. It was like this kind of little pamphlet thing. And I kind of remember seeing these pictures of the altar, and there's like in the mist, like a dove or like Mary in the, background. And so I was like, I guess very kind of curious about it, but almost kind of scared of it. And I can look back now and see that I was being guided. It's like I really wanted to go to this private all boys school that was like a soccer powerhouse, and I didn't get in, and I was kind of devastated. And I wound up at a better soccer school, and then I got a full ride to college for soccer. And I wanted to go to University of Vermont, which was like the most expensive public school in the country. And my parents had kind of lost our financial security. I wound up going to Loyola in Baltimore, and I was a writing and philosophy major, but I maybe would have gotten lost at University of Vermont. You couldn't skip classes at Loyola. And I got a pretty good education, and they actually taught us how to think. So I've kind of been, I think, divinely guided. And of course, you can only see that from the perspective of time and looking backwards.
I love that. Well, when you had that first experience of, I would call it unconditional love, that has to be really hard if you don't have some good guidance, because the world looks very different the next day. I mean, you're no longer the same person, but there's still the same awful problems happening in the world. What was your process to better understand that? And any guidance you can give from someone when they do have this life-changing awakening event?
I really started journaling, and I would go through a journal like every 3 to 6 months. I was never an outsider, but it made me feel very different from my contemporaries, because I was like, how do I talk to these kids about this stuff? And I'm, writing about what they would probably thought crazy stuff in my journal, and like trying to understand how the universe works. And I mean, it kind of took me down a very challenging road, and I didn't have like mentors or anything like this in this area. But I was so desperate to find answers for like, what are we doing here? Why are we here? Like, why was I born to these parents in this location, in this financial whatever? And I mean, there was one point where I think I was in between junior and senior year of college, and I was in a pretty dark place. I was like going through some challenges with like the first love of my life. And I was also kind of experiencing sort of the first writer's block. Obviously now I know how to deal with this kind of energy, but back then, if I couldn't get it out of me, it was like twigs starting to gather in a river. And then it's like this blockage. And I used to call them like learning blocks. I would come up to this point where I just felt so stuck. And it would be like a Friday night, and I'd like go into my parents' basement, and I'd just like get into the liquor and probably smoke a little weed. And I'd just sit there and I'd write 10 to 15 pages without picking up my pen. And in the process, I'm like crying, and like there's tears all over the pages. And like I woke up the next morning, and it was like I was a new person, and I could move into like the next phase of my life. This one particular night when I was in between junior and senior year of college, I was just kind of like pondering not good thoughts. This life is so kind of painful, and I can't figure it out. I was very in my head. It just so happened I was interning at Details magazine, and I had just bought some wire because I wanted to start playing like with wire sculptures and stuff. And I remembered I got it, and I just started playing this with this wire that night, and it got me through the night. And then I was like, Mom, I think I need to talk to somebody. And I only saw this therapist twice. And he's like, okay, you're a writer. What other outlets do you have? And I was like, well, I mean, music's my other passion. I used to play when I was a little kid. And he's like, well, learn guitar. And I'm like, I'm 22 years old. I can't learn guitar. And then, by the time I was 28, even though I didn't know what I was doing, I just surrounded myself with good people. I was the front man in a band in Seattle. So I've just always been kind of just seeking these creative expressions, these creative outlets. keeps me sane.
Well, I was going to say, like, you found a way, like you said, to move the energy. And I think that is a huge piece for people, that when you go through this big shift, that you need to find healthy outlets. And so do you have some suggestions or even practices? Like, I liked your twig building up. There's going to be a dam at some point. You're going to hit the wall. And how do you release it?
When I was working in advertising, I would like go for a walk and I'd put on my headphones and I would just listen to something where melody or improvisation or something like that, where I could get lost in the music, which means I'm in trance. And before I started the walk, I would ask myself the question that I need solving. And I mean, I've never not gotten the answer on a walk. It's like this 5D and 3D process. You receive the information, in sort of the 5D, and that's a creative process. And then when I sit down to work on that, I'm in the 3D and I'm in the editing mode and I'm kind of stitching ideas together. And sometimes I can't believe that I get to do this, because I was just a kid from New Jersey with like a dream, with like a very hard internal voice and a lot of sort of unworthiness and doubt and lack and all that stuff. I've been dream tethered. I call it dream tethering. I've been tethered to this dream energetically for so long. And even when I've tried to get off the writing train, life's just like, bitch, get the hell back on there.
You bring up a really good segue into dream tethering. Bring up your definition or your explanation of how you're working with dream tethering.
A dream is a noun, and a dream is the memory of what your soul envisions before it expresses human. Tethering is a verb, and it's the utmost length, limit, or extent to which one can go in action, ability, or resources. And then dream tethering for me is a process, and that is a transformational healing and creation process that is expressed in the pursuit, execution, and realization of your greatest potential in its highest timeline, in its fullest expression. So I think this is possible for anybody, but it takes courage and it takes commitment and it takes discipline. It's not an external knocking down doors and stuff like that. It's being still and it's connecting to the vision and pulling it towards you, or allowing it to pull you towards it. If you had to distill my body of work into one thing, it's about surrender and trust, because that's what I'm trying to master in this life. So the book Dream Tethering, the first book is kind of about the dream of the 17-year-old self, the self-actualization journey, where I bought a one-way ticket to India. And this one is me 3 decades in the future talking to my 17-year-old self. And the idea is that because time is a human construct, if I can teach my 17-year-old self these things now, it's going to alter our current and future timeline. It's a mechanism by which I can tell this story. But, I'm talking to my 17-year-old self and I said, I'm going to save you a lot of time and I'm going to give you the question that's central to your life. And it's this, am I powerful enough? Do I believe in myself enough to become the creator, the executor, and the master of the dream? Because that's really what I'm doing. I've had a lot of fear on this journey because I'm like, how the hell is this going to, happen?
Is fear your biggest roadblock?
I think, fear and limited thinking. I created this whole new model of self-actualization in this new book, the circlotron. Yeah. So I was listening, I put random on my phone. This song, Eyes of the World by the Grateful Dead, came on. I call it a quantum string. And a quantum string is something in our external world that collapses time to an inciting incident. And so for me, when I hear that Eyes of the World, I'm totally connected with that 17-year-old kid who was just like driving around the back roads of New Jersey with his little Yorkshire Terrier on his lap, listening to the Grateful Dead and being like, what's going to happen in my life? Like, where am I going? What is this all doing? So anyway, I was walking through the harbor in Dana Point, and I feel so good and I connect with that song. And I was like, what would I tell my 17-year-old self if I had the opportunity to speak to him? Let me ask you first, what would you tell your 17-year-old self?
Stop worrying. It's all going to be okay.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the thing that I said to my 17-year-old self was, chill the fuck out. Like, it's just going to unfold. And you can't just wake up and be a New York Times bestseller. You have to have a lot of life experience. You have to, live and lose. And I knew at a young age, 17, 18, 19, because of these people that I held on a pedestal, which was like Steinbeck, Kerouac, James Joyce. I was like, if I want to have something big to write about, I have to have big experiences. So in my mind, it was like, I just had this fantasy of travel and stuff. And I got to play soccer in Europe when I was 13 and 15. So I had a taste already probably for the travel bug, but I was stuck for so many years. And then I think I was probably 33 and I was, in a job I hated, and I had a relationship and a job end in the same week. And I was like, oh, maybe life's trying to tell me something. And I'd always wanted to be of service, and I knew that would be something to write about. And, this girl was like, I need time and space. And I'm like, disappeared for a couple of days. And then she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I just bought a one-way ticket to Tanzania. I'm going to volunteer in an orphanage. And then, of course, as that game goes at that age, she's like, oh my God, I can't get enough of you. So I took off to volunteer in Tanzania, but I knew it was a special place. And then 10 years later, it was featured on 60 Minutes. It's called the Rift Valley Children's Village in Karatu, Tanzania, I believe. And I think, my mother was a very loving Catholic, but fearful person, very fearful. So I kind of grew up in this fear bubble, and I was a martini baby, like, surprise. It was my dad's favorite drink, and it was the drink of my conception. And I actually found that out because my mother was kind of slipping from Parkinson's and dementia. I wanted to know about their relationship because I was like deep in therapy and trying to figure myself out and all this stuff. And she mistook the question and was like, well, your father had a law dinner that night in New York, and we stayed at the park, whatever. And, we made love. And I was just like, huh? It's like, I'm gonna go for a walk. Her best friend was there. She was like laughing hysterically. But it's something I've been thinking about a little bit recently. With a child and parents, there is this triangle structure. If things aren't going well in two of those angles, there was a lot of stress in my household around that time. And it was like, I was the youngest by 8.5, 9 years. I got all of my mother's love, but also that love, she was projecting this kind of fear upon me. My sister at one point said, like, I think you do all of these things you do, which is taking some big risks and not without fear, because you're kind of battling that like fear bubble. Because I was almost like an only child. My siblings were kind of out in college. And I honestly don't know how I've done it. Like I like buying a one-way ticket to India without a Lonely Planet or a plan or anything. I just landed the first day in New Delhi, and like for a day and a half, I was just in my hotel room, like, I made a huge mistake. Finally, I was just like, I got to get the hell out of this room. And I just started walking in concentric circles around the hotel. And then I was like, oh my God, this is like, there's some amazing, profound stuff in this city. The only thing I knew I was going to go was to go up to Dharamshala, which is at the foothills of the Himalayas. And it's where the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan government in exile is. And somebody just told me it was a cool place for artists and exiles. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to head up there. But I got connected to this guy. I asked a friend, she was from India. So I tracked her down and she's like, well, do you want to volunteer at this eco ashram? And I was like, what the hell does that mean? And I just thought I was going to be, sweeping floors, learning to make hospital corner beds and stuff like that. And it turns out this guy was like India's most important environmental lawyer. He wanted somebody to write some grants. And I was like, well, I've never written grants, but I know how to write. So I just need the structure. And all of this came out of my mother passed away in 2010. And I had kind of a decade of sick parents. Everybody was going on vacation and I was going back to New Jersey to visit my parents. And every time I saw my mother, there would be like a little bit more of her gone. And it was like, I thought I was ready. And then when she actually passed away, it was like a rug being swept out. And I was totally lost and scared. My sister's friend was like, okay, you're a writer. I want you to do this exercise. I want you to write down 5 things you're grateful for and 5 things you want to create. And you're going to find that the things you create today are going to be the things you're grateful for in the future. And I was like, I'll try anything. And so I just started doing that and everything started unfolding. And like, I wasn't working at the time. I went to say goodbye to my mother and I came back to Seattle and the ad agency was like, sorry, you don't have a job anymore. And I was like, what? I spent like 2 months just kind of walking around Seattle while my mom was in hospice, like waiting. So I was like, I just want the right job for right now. I surrender money, everything else, and I get this job. And I wanted freedom, and it was a 3-month contract. And then at the end of 3 months, my boss was like, hey, well, you want to extend it 3 months? I'm like, okay, but like, I'm really leaving. And in the end of these 6 months, I'm leaving. And right before I was about to take off to India, he was like, hey, would you be interested in working like 10 to 20 hours a week in India? And I was like, hell yeah, I would. I mean, making American money over there. After 3 months in India, I had miles. So I flew home to surprise my family. And then I went back out to Seattle because I had a flight back to Asia to work with somebody else. So I just dropped through the office for like 3 days or something like that. And my boss pulled me aside and he was like, hey, why don't you just bill me for 40 hours a week for the last 3 months of your contract? And I was like, excuse me? Okay. So I had surrendered, money and all this stuff, and I made it back like, tenfold. And I'm just backpacking and making 2 incomes. And I just created all this stuff. I just wrote it down and it happened.
You hear when people surrender and the magic starts to flow, and we hear it and we're like, oh, but that was for that person. And what do you tell people when they're like so scared to fully surrender and follow their dreams? Or it sounds like you're kind of become an expert in complete surrender.
I mean, it would appear that way, but it's not without struggle to get me to that point. And it's like you're standing on the edge, but you don't know what's in the abyss. And that's terrifying. But what I've learned is that when you jump, the net appears. I put that in my first book, and it's like, it's never failed me. Sometimes it's taken me a long time to step off that ledge. The last 2 years were pretty challenging. And I was in a lot of contraction and fear. I mean, I had a lot of amazing experiences and stuff, but personally, like I was isolated out here in the desert, and I had this book and it wasn't working to get it out into the world. And it was like one thing after the other. And here I am now, and it's such a better book. It's a better title. You create outside of time, right? You create with your thoughts, and thoughts are energy. Because we are in time and we're in this third dimension, it takes time for that intention to manifest. Dr. Joe Dispenza would always say, like, it's like dropping a stone in the pond, and those ripples go out, and you don't know how big the pond is, which means you don't know how long it's going to take that thing you're trying to create to come back to you. But I've had these experiences where it's like, I just throw something outlandish out there, like this will never happen. And it happens super quick. But then it's like the other things where I'm like trying to make something happen, and it's just, I'm creating distance from it by the lack of that trying and not having it. It's usually like the more absurd something is, the quicker it happens.
Well, I go through my experience with psilocybin. I never even smoked pot, Tim. And I had been doing breath work, and I'd been working on consciousness and meditations and all those things. And I had a dear friend who this had changed her life. And she had gone from working in corporate and was completely changed her life. It was like her light bulb was on. It was such a cool experience. She went to the Beckley Institute. She was a lawyer, so she had really studied and analyzed it. And I just wanted to support her in that process as she's becoming a facilitator. And so I had no expectations. So I guess what I really wanted to see, the idea of surrender and just not even having expectations, because I had one of the most powerful experiences in my life, I think, because I had no expectations. I didn't need, want, or expect anything from it. And that's where the gift kind of can really flow in. It's like when we kind of created this mind movie of the 10 things we got to get out of this, that the universe is like, well, that's not how it works. And the idea of surrender, setting intention, and letting go and having no expectation. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, non-attachment, again, that's easier said than done. But, when I write these things in my gratitude intention journal, I do it like every morning. This person who gifted me this exercise just like told me to like shut the book and forget about it. That little bit of intention that you put out there creates this ripple in the field. In the first book, A Curious Year in the Great Vivarium Experiment, every couple chapters is a gratitude intention journal, because that's what I was doing. And that is what actually created the story arc of the book. I was writing these things down And then I was having these grand adventures as a result of it. So I've had a lot of people reach out to me and like, oh my God, I read your book and I started doing this thing and you're not going to believe what's happened. I'm always in awe, but I'm like, yeah, of course it's going to happen. Like, you create it, you don't have any attachment to it, and magic flows. But the practice is just coming up against that resistance and that fear.
Is the practice a daily practice for you? Do you kick yourself when you don't do it every day? How do you surrender if someday you can't get it in?
Probably up until about a month ago. Since 2015, it was like the longest I had gone without meditating. When I was working with Dr. Zach Bush on his book, I was so excited to wake up and sit down and work on this material. I was like, I'm not going to meditate today. And I just wake up, I do my little gratitude and intention exercise outside and just sit down at the computer and get lost for hours in it. But I was on this writing retreat with a client of mine in Encinitas, California in July. And I spent probably almost 3 months with her in lockdown working on a book. Didn't even know her. That's a crazy story how we met, but became one of my best friends. During lockdown, we just meditated all the time together and we were playing with consciousness. I'd be sending her energy and see what she experienced or thought about in her meditation. So we were on this writing retreat and it was the first night and we did this big meditation. I was like, holy shit, I have been an anchorless ship for a long time. I'm like, I got to get back into this. I've just been kind of drifting and it's no wonder why the magic isn't happening in my life because I'm not grounded in anything. I'm not being still. Stillness is so important for creation. Stillness and quietness. That's where the whisper of the universe whispers to you. When you're so busy all the time, it's there is no space for that information to come through. That's the guides. That's your higher self. It's whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, the stillness and the silence is the ultimate possibility. I mean, it's really magic space, the magic sauce. That's phenomenal. Well, so now that you feel you've rode the roller coaster of life, you've experienced so much, and now you're trying to craft, through your writings and through your connections, and you've even created a coursework around trying to help people with their practices. You want to tell us about the coursework you've created, and is that going to be a part of the books that are coming out as well, or is that separate?
Yeah. The URL is Live the 13 Keys. Because I was waiting on all of these things and literary agents and when is my agent going to get healthy? And instead of just sitting around, I decided I was going to create a course. It's kind of this whole dream tethering process.
Was 13 something that resonated with you, or?
That's a very good question. I was traveling through Europe that summer for 2 months and I'm day 59 of 60 days of travel. My ex-girlfriend was in London at a Dispenza workshop and she was all lit up and texting me, and I broke up with her, but it was every time she texted me, it was my internal world went into chaos. And I was like, what is going on here? I was on this beach in Croatia and I was walking along this path and I put on my headphones and I asked myself the question, why every time when she texts me, does my internal world go into chaos? I laid down on this rocky beach and my heart was racing and I was like, oh my God, I got to keep moving. I don't want to feel this. And I started saying that I'm the violet flame made manifest to heal myself. And I saw this quantum string open up to fourth grade, this wounding in fourth grade and these repeated patterns. And they just kind of made me more continuously unconscious, I think, in relationships. And when I saw that, it was so devastating. It took me 2 years to get over and forgive myself. And I wasn't a terrible person to her or anything, but I was very selfish. It was all about me. So it was such a powerful experience. I was like, I got to write one more chapter about this. And that put it to 13. And then I thought, well, I wonder what the numerology is behind 13. And I'm not sure this is going to make it into the next draft. I'm kind of on the fence here, but I started going down this rabbit hole of 13. And I was like, why is this number hidden from us? Some buildings don't have the 13th floor. It turns out that 13 represents the alpha and the omega, and it's a life, death, and rebirth process. in Egyptian mythology, there's 13 steps on the ladder of consciousness. And when you reach the 13th step, you've completed your karmic circle. It also represents the divine feminine. Mary Magdalene, Mary, Sophia. There are 13 women's menstrual cycles. So 13 times 28 equals 364. And around a turtle are 13 panels around the outside and 28 panels in the inside, which is again 364. And the Native Americans thought of that as a calendar and a totem for patience moving through life and all this stuff. I listened to Robert Edward Grant at one point, and he was saying how when you draw sacred geometry, it unlocks your pineal gland. So I started drawing Metatron's cube on this Sunday night, and I didn't get it right, but the next day, a new title came in, a new table of contents. I started the last chapter, and then that Thursday night, I started drawing Metatron's cube again. And I realized that there's 13 circles in Metatron's cube. Another thing is there was Jesus and there was the 12 apostles. So it's the 12 archetypes coming to understand the one. But with Metatron's cube, within it are held the platonic solids, which are the structures that make up everything in the universe. And then last but not least, when Archangel Metatron is depicted, he's depicted with Metatron's cube. It's a symbol for the healing of humanity. I was just blown away by this. And then there's this whole other rabbit hole I went down with the Knights Templar and Friday the 13th, when they were kind of taken out and they were guarding all this secret ancient knowledge, supposedly going back to Atlantis and the Holy Grail and the Ark of the Covenant. It's just this endless rabbit hole. And I was like, could this intentional obfuscation of number 13 be a way to intentionally get us off of the cyclical nature of, our connection to nature, to the moon, to the stars, to the sun? So
I love that. I am a huge proponent of a 13-month calendar. I think that would be a game changer for humanity. That 13, what you just described on 13, is a whole segment in itself, because there's so much power as we start to connect in. And how synchronistic was it for you to have created a 13-step program? Did it come through you, or is it of you, or?
I don't know. I just sit down and do the work. You do the work, you show up. I mean, I think no matter what you're doing, if you are kind of living in this energy paradigm and you are in surrender and trust, you do your work, you do your 50%, the universe comes and meets you with its 50%. And when you are in surrender and trust, it unfolds in a way better way than you could have ever imagined. I've seen that time and time again. The more I try to limit and control this vision, either the longer it takes or the smaller it is. And when I completely let go, these things happen and I'm like, what? Why can't I do this all the time?
Exactly. Well, Tim, I would say this is one of the most chaotic times on the planet. And I know people are feeling it. I think there's opportunity there. What's your wisdom of living through these times?
Don't pay attention to the media. Be still, go within, do not give into the fear. I think that this planet is going to see its greatest spiritual revolution ever in the next 2 years. I don't know what that's going to look like or what it's going to unfold or if disclosure is going to finally happen and stuff. Throughout this time, whoever you are being is going to be amplified. That's the nature of this energy that's coming in. If you are happy, joyful, connected, that's going to be magnified. If you are completely invested in this charade of politics and the fear and the separation, division, it's just going to get worse and worse for you. Imagine if you fill up a balloon. You've got a balloon right here, and everything in the third dimension is in this balloon. But as you speed up time, the balloon is starting to expand. And as the balloon expands, the walls become more porous. So all of that information from higher dimensions is bleeding into this dimension right now. And it's just happening at a more and more accelerated rate. I think we kind of shifted timelines. And I think there was a time in the last 2+ years and stuff where it was this could go either way. But I think we've kind of, as a collective, have sort of shifted this timeline. And because everything is a fractal, you have to shift yourself first. And if you can shift your part of the fractal, then that's going to create a shift in another part because everything is interconnected. So tune out the fear, move into your passion. Joseph Campbell, who created the hero's journey, said, the cave you fear to enter holds your truth or something like that. So it's like, we don't have a lot of time. Fucking enjoy life. And at the end of this Dream Tethering book, I'm talking to my 17-year-old self. I said to my younger self, live your life like it's document worthy. And this is no time to play small. So stop playing small.
Wow. I mean, that's just such a powerful line. In these times, we need to hear that. We need to hear live your life and do it boldly, fearlessly.
Yeah. And there's one more thing I would add to that. And this kind of came in on a flight to Florida about a week or two ago. But it was like, ever since I was a young kid, 17 or whatever, I imagined my life as a movie. I had to live a big life. So what do you do to live a big life? You have to make main character choices. So that is something I would leave people with, is like, don't be little, make main character choices.
Make yourself the main character of your life. Stop playing the part. Oh, that's really good. Tim, where can people find your work?
My website is therealtimshields.com. If you want to explore the first book, it's acuriousyear.com. The course is livethe13keys.com. And on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, I am also The Real Tim Shields. Maybe I've been hiding a little bit, but I'm about to really start dropping some things on these and some theories that I have that are my own. I'm excited to finally play the game. I shifted my thinking around social media, so I'm excited to share a lot of it.
You're creating you're rewriting the rules.
You know why? Because I have to make main character choices.
Thank you for that. I mean, that even for me, I feel like I have to get my big girl pants on to play the social media game. So I think I heard it once. It's like the modern day lynching, on the town square. Like, you have to become comfortable with being so completely standing out there in your underwear. But there's the magic when you show up authentically and in your truth. And people are looking for that. And the world is hungry for authenticity and for what I think is your message of higher consciousness, your message of how to manifest, how to live your best life with purpose and kindness. This doesn't mean that your success is to the detriment of anyone else's. And I think that's key. You've given us some great wisdom today. If there was any little tidbit that you wanted to share with the world that you think every soul needs to hear right now, what would that be?
This kind of came in from my first book, but the world changes through two things: story and consciousness. Government is pretty useless. It's pretty worthless. There are good people there, but it's like, government doesn't make the changes. The artists and the visionaries and the creators make the changes. And that's got to be a bottom up. That's got to be a bottom up construction. If you think about the power structure in the world, all of the power exists here and everything flows down. But I saw this video one time, and it was like they were talking about this power structure, and there was this triangle made of sugar cubes. But then the person poured the water in the bottom, and the whole structure came down. And that's what we have to do. The change has to come from each and every one of us at this bottom level to topple this structure of fear, division, power, and control. That comes down to you making the daily choice to choose love over fear.
I love that. That means we're all empowered and we can make a difference.
100%. It's like Dr. Joe Dispenza says, reality is determined by a network of collective observers. So we have to take our attention off of that story of fear and division, because I don't really think that is what humanity is. I think humanity is, a loving species, but we've been captured for God knows how long, hundreds, thousands of years. But I think now is our time to awaken and maybe become like part of a galactic family. The only way out of this is through the evolution and expansion of consciousness.
Wow. I mean, talk about someone finding his harmonic alignment. Thank you so much, Tim. Like, what a true treasure and a treat to have you here today.
Thank you. I love these conversations. So I appreciate your time and listen to me jibber jabber.
That was awesome. Thanks for all the wisdom and truth bomb.
Are you ready for your Energy for Life bioenergetic nest scan? Dr. Larissa Sharapova and myself, Priscilla Koblenz, offer personal, private, 90-minute consults to get you back to optimal health and well-being. And starting in the new year, we're offering an Energy Mastery Program, a monthly membership, which will give you access to a monthly scan as well as 2 group masterclasses to help you optimize your wellness in the new year. For more details, visit the show notes or check out harmonicalignment.co. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Harmonic Alignment. If something resonated with you, we would love to hear about it. Please consider leaving us a 5-star review and subscribing so you don't miss an upcoming episode. Thank you. The information contained in this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and not intended for the purpose of diagnosing, treating, curing, or preventing any disease. Before using any products referenced on the podcast, consult with your healthcare provider. Carefully read all labels and directions. The products and information received through the podcast should not be used to replace a consultation or advice from your healthcare provider. If you suspect you have a medical problem or have any healthcare questions, please promptly call your healthcare provider. This podcast, including Dr. Larissa Sharapova and Priscilla Koblenz, and the producers are not responsible for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained in this podcast. This podcast may contain endorsements and advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct financial benefit to the product or services referenced.